short tutorial on how to add a new contract into the system. Now there is a video already on the client wizard, which is the tool that you would use to add a new client or edit an existing one, and one of those steps of course is the contract setup. But we do get asked on a semi-regular basis about adding new contracts, so I thought it would be helpful to add a separate video specifically for this. Now by contract I mean the field that you fill in here when you're doing a new job in the system. So in this demo system here it is indeed captioned contract. It might well be called something different in yours, maybe call type or something similar, and it's usually used to break down the type of work for the customer that you're logging the job for. Now you might normally want to add a new contract if you've taken on, say, a new work type for that customer. Say previously you've only been doing reactive works for this particular client, and now you've taken on the maintenance contract, say. You would need to add a new contract for that. Of course you may also want to edit a contract that's already there, or maybe even extend it for a bit longer, or redo the contract completely with, say, new prices for the next financial year. The steps that I'm about to cover in this video will cover all those scenarios for you. We begin the process from the manual job entry screen, or the screen where you would enter your jobs. And so what we would do is we would start by filling in the name of the client or the customer who you want to add this new contract for. So let's say we're going to use this client here. As I've selected that, I can then choose our sites or assets, or I could just go straight for the contract. I'm going to go straight for contract for now because I want to see all contracts that exist for this client. So as we can see by clicking on the live search button here, we've currently got 4 demo contracts set up. We have planned works, projects, quotes and reactive works. So these are all our different work streams that we want to break our jobs down into for this client. So let's say we want to add a maintenance contract to here. The way we do this is we begin by pressing on the plus button next to the contract field. This has taken us into the customer setup, or the client wizard, and we're at the step where we need to add a new contract. In this table here we can see a list of contracts that already exist. So these are the ones that we saw in our live search on the job entry screen. Now from here we can edit any one of these by pressing the edit button, or we can get rid of it by pressing delete. If we want to add new, we fill in the details down here. Now I've got the contractor and depot fields set in my system. You may not have these depending on how your company is structured and we've set up your system for you. But if you have got these, you need to specify which depot or company, or contractor rather, which division of your company this all works for. So in this one, we're going to do it against this contractor, and I want to choose the head office division of our company here under depot. Now the contract number and the contract fields, this is the descriptors for this contract. Now if you are doing an interface to a client, then you probably shouldn't set up a new contract without speaking to us first. However, the contract reference number is what you'll use to refer to this type of work. So it might be that your client has a code for the work stream, maybe. You could use that. If not, then I would tend to go with a abbreviation of the client and abbreviation of what the work is. So in this case, I'm going to call it Epix-maint, because this is the Epix maintenance. Now the next field down is the price list, and the price list relates to what prices for the sales codes you're going to use on any invoices for this client. Also, if you're using a schedule of rates, the prices are what will show when you choose a specific SOR code when you're creating a job. So if we press on our question mark here, we will see all available price lists that are linked to the sales code list or the schedule of rates list that this customer is using. So if you're using one of those price lists and you're happy to go ahead with that for this new contract, you just simply choose that here. You could of course create a new price list, and there'll be a different video on that, on how to do that process, where you would then create new prices based upon the sales code list that you're using for this client. So I'm just going to choose the same ones as the planned works. The start date and end dates are when you want this contract to run for. So I would assume that for today's date, I'm going to go now. But it might be we need to backdate that till the beginning of the month so we can log some jobs on this that we've already had in the system. No problem. Change the date here. The end date, if there is a specific end date for the contract that has been dealt with you and your customer, then you would definitely come to an end at the end of the financial year, then you would put that in here to make sure that jobs don't get logged in past that end date. But if it's an open-ended one and that there's no end to the contract formally, then I would always go with something far enough in the future that it's not going to cause you a problem with it running out on you when you least expect it. The invoice terms are the number of days that you want the invoice terms to say payment is required by. So you can specify that on individual contracts rather than just at client level. We allow you to do it here as well. Now there are additional bits of information here which I'll cover off separately, but the main thing you need to do now, if assuming that you're happy with this as being a basic contract, is you need to decide whether you want to bring some assets over from an existing contract. So what I mean by assets is properties, or indeed assets, pieces of equipment, that exist on previously created contracts. So as we can see here, the planned works contract has already got 3 properties against it. If you want those 3 properties to be able to be logged work against for the maintenance work, then just put a selection there for copy, and that will, when we create the contract, mean that these 3 assets are then linked to this contract as well. Similarly, if you're going to do work plans or work types, if you've got a scheduled work plan system going on, you could specify the work types here that are relevant. And also, if you've got any cost codes, or if you're using cost code maybe differently to a normal cost code, and perhaps you've got supervisor or job owner as the cost code value here, you can specify again which one of those, or more than one, is relevant to this new contract. Once you're done, you press add, and the green bar at the top of the screen now indicates that the contract was created successfully, and we can see now that it has added a new contract here into the list. I mentioned earlier about editing contracts, so say we'd made a mistake, we could press edit at this stage, and we could go back and make a change to any of the things that we've done here. Let's say we wanted to add the voids team to there, we could press update. So now if I come out of here and I go back to our job entry screen, on the list of available contracts for this client, we can now see the maintenance work contract. And also, if I was to choose from the list of sites, properties to log this job at, again, because I copied those sites over, it's available. And we can also now type in here maintenance to link it to that contract for this job. Also, the cost codes that I selected, those 3 that we had, are also available as well. So that was the process of adding a simple contract to the system for a client that already exists. Now I mentioned there were a couple of fields in the contract setup that were a little more advanced. If we were to go on to the adding of a contract again, and stepping into the new contract area, here we can see those options that I mentioned before. So the charge by secondary ref and secondary ref required fields, those influence what you do with the additional reference that you can use when you're creating a job. So if I was to just minimize our client wizard a moment, we can see over here on the job entry screen that we've got the job number field. This is the one that you can generate to job number 4 if you haven't got one. But the additional reference, or as it's captioned in our system, the secondary ref, this is an additional field that you can use to add a reference to a job. So if we go back to our client wizard setup again and go into the contract, you can see here the charge by secondary ref. Adding a new contract and ticking this will mean that on the invoice, whatever reference you've put against the job in that field, that reference will be used on the invoice rather than the job number. So just to show there again, in this example now, if our job reference was job ref 1 and the secondary ref was secondary ref, then when we generate our invoice for this job with the secondary reference box ticked on the contract setup, then this is what will appear on the invoice. Going back into the client wizard again, the secondary ref required, again all that means is that it becomes a mandatory field. So on our job entry screen, it means that there will be a blue dot here, and this is a mandatory field that you must complete before you can add the job to the system. The archived flag, that's not something you'd really be using once you're creating a contract. That's something you would use to archive a contract that's no longer in use. So I can just demonstrate that now. Let's say, for example, we no longer want the quotes contract. We could press edit and then press archived and then press update. And now if we go back into our job creation screen, let's begin this again so that we have a fresh canvas. If we say training client, and then I go for the contract field here, because I've archived it, as we can see, the quote contract is no longer there. And finally, the colour for the contract. If I edit the contract for this particular client here for the day-to-day works, and I specify I want this one in red, and I press update, what this does is it highlights anything in the system that relates to this contract, so job reports, in that colour. So as you can see here, it's highlighted that row in red. If I now run a find job report for that client, I press update filters just to refresh my results, we can see here now that any of the day-to-day contracts are highlighted in this report in red. So as we can see, there's now quite a few down at the bottom there. So that's a useful little feature to be able to visually recognise a particular contract, maybe even for a particular client, within a big list. That was how to add and edit a contract with fairly basic settings. There is an additional option available that wasn't visible on this particular video in the contract setup, and that's for the advanced contract options. There'll be a separate video on that for those of you that use that particular function, or indeed if you don't use it and you'd like to see a little more about that, do see our related video on the advanced contract setup. For now, however, that's all from me. If you've got any questions at all, then don't hesitate to give me a shout.